Hi everyone, my name is Hannah Yerington and I am a first year poetry student in the MFA program here at BGSU, as I'm sure you've all gathered if you're here tonight with me. I am originally from California, but I've spent the last 6 years in British Columbia, in Canada, in Vancouver, and a little town called Squamish, and now I'm coming to you live from Bowling Green. And I'm going to start us off with some poetry, and then after me, Joe is going to go, so I think we're in for a good show tonight. Just starting off with a little disclaimer, if I have any family members in the audience, which is one, I'm sorry, or I hope you really like it. I think poetry is a really interesting art form because in many ways it is the most personal, but also at times often it's the least personal because we're working with material that may be very vulnerable and very true, or we're blurring the lines of fiction and playing between spaces of character and thought experiment, which is certainly taking place in my work. A little bit about my work. I'm very whimsical and playful. I'll be pulling a lot of elements of Judaism, some folklore, as well as I just talk about water a lot. And as it's snowing outside and I'm from a beach town, I find the beach just finds its way into my poems more and more. So I'm sure you'll see that. I'm gonna start off with a piece called My Ancestors Wear Lip Gloss, and I've just become pretty disillusioned with the idea recently that our ancestors are these removed folks in our past who we often question the motives and the narratives of, and so this is just me playing with the idea of what if my ancestors were teenage girls? And I'm not going to play with this pen. So this is called My Ancestors Wear Lip Gloss. My ancestors are teenage girls. They speak in sparkles and guts, order whipped cream, kiss flowers with teeth. They send texts that say, I never, ever, ever want to see you again. Cast curses with emojis, mix acid and acronyms in a single message. My ancestors climb trees in leggings, nest among pine needles, pull safety pins from their ears, pierce robin eggs. My ancestors wear thick eyeliner, smudge tender like Vancouver rain, and everyone who ever said, you'll understand when you're older. They pick locks to diaries, wrap sweaters around their jeans when they bleed, wrap arms around each other. Screenshot the world's history and save it. My ancestors upspeak their stories best, creating poetry out of plastic tubes, secrets held between glass lips, codes clinging to music chords. I love my ancestors best for their loud voices, puke stars, carbonated hearts, memories preserved in resin and rhodium. We don't care about your ancestors. We don't care about your elders. My ancestors are busy. Archiving scraped knees, chipped acrylic nails, the names of their best friends. They are busy writing books to one day fill the greatest libraries with pink gel pens, signatures dotted with a heart. This next one is called Kosher Prawn Turnovers, and it came out last week in the racket, so thank you to them. Kosher Prawn Turnovers. My sister's first act as a Jewish priestess is to name all prawn turnovers kosher because I balk at steamed pork buns. After my sister's initiation, she places all her Levi's in the back of the closet, begins to wear only long dresses, vintage buttons, upcycled prayer shawls. She tells me there is a first blessing for everything. So when I pull on soft pink joggers, I chant gently under my breath. My sister suggests a mikveh. I think of warm water and honeyed walls after our monthly cycles, but we stand at the nude beach where I swallow sand, wonder about the relation between ritual immersion and drowning. My sister talks of red thread, the ocean as body. She sprays drugstore rose water on our foreheads. She tells me the goddess has joined us. I scan the beach for women in flowing linen robes. I share a conspiratorial look with the seagull next to me. Imagine him wearing a small kippah, curly side locks peeking out from his feathered head. I leave the beach holding my sister's hand, unsure if I am more spiritual or more sandy. Yet Tuesday comes with a full moon, a moon heavy in her orbit. I roll my eyes at her pockmarked face. I don't appreciate uninvited visitors. But I pull out the battered candlesticks my sister gave me, sway gently as I light Sabbath lights, and then I order dim sum. This next piece is called Instructions on Gray Area, and I wrote this while I was living in Vancouver, but my family was in California, and the fires were really bad around August, September time, and the smoke from California had just reached Vancouver. Instructions on gray area. Check the IQ of the smoke, of the air. Ask the smoke, how did it get so smart? Was Smokey a professor there? I boil thyme and rosemary on the stove, wash all the cloth masks with lavender detergent, hang them on the dish rack to dry. I pull gray clouds from my skin, pluck the moon from the sky and wear it around my neck, feel its weight against my collarbones. I carve the bees out from my lungs, taste their honey on my fingertips, cough up pollen, flush their winged bodies down the toilet. Outside, I urge my dog to pee faster, step swiftly on the warts on the soles of my feet. This week, I will not swim in False Creek Ferry water. I will fill silver bowls with liquid, place teacups with water for the white kitten. My dreams smell of fire. My days are filled with fur and chapped lips. When the dragon's breath takes up the skyline of my city, I close the blinds. And this is called How to Leave, and it's a pretty sentimental poem, but I wrote it as I was leaving Vancouver to move here to Bowling Green. And every time I try to leave somewhere and go on a, cross-country or cross-countries trip, my car dies without fail a day or two before. So this is also addressing that. How to Leave. Buy a 1996 blue Subaru Outback. Fill it with books and mugs. Place your dog's bed in the passenger seat. Put all of your feelings in the glove box. Leave the light on in the car overnight. Kill the car. Jump the car. Start the engine. Leave it running. Sit in the driver's seat and consider all the reasons you want to stay. Willow trees, fog soft as butter, hands worn to all your pockets, streets with honeybee names, days of soup and oil-stained notebooks, blueberry-colored tongues, fleece shirts and candles keeping vigil, the ferry door at the front of your house. Turn on the radio. Leave. This next piece is called Lagoon Liturgy, and the Ballinas Lagoon plays in my work a lot. It's from my hometown of Ballinas, and I think the farther I am from it, the more of a character it becomes in my mind. So, Lagoon Liturgy. I spend summers in a yellow houseboat on the Ballinas Lagoon, swaying with the floorboards, swimming with seals, days passing in quiet exultation and solitude. Once, a starfish told me there was a prayer for everything. So I sent a seagull out over the Pacific, hoping to get a eucalyptus branch back. I believe there are prayers for some things, like throwing pieces of bread into the sea, walking into waves in the middle of the winter to feel clean, feet torn by barnacles and mussels. I used to go to the ocean and hear worship, not knowing that the shape of shells holds sounds particularly well, watch leviathans slither across the channel, unaware of the migration of gray whales. Now I know that sometimes seagulls eat starfish whole or shake them till they break to bits. But if there is a prayer for everything, it would make the most sense to find it by the sea, words for wholeness washing up like psalms and seaweed. I question the devoutness of seagulls, but there is a divinity to starfish. The way they collect up their torn bodies, hold steadfast to slippery rocks. So if I swim to the seabed of the Ballinas Lagoon, maybe I'll see a starfish once broken to bits, now standing whole, teaching a synagogue of sea creatures, anemones, urchins, and rockfish, a prayer for every living thing. This next piece is called How the Women in My Family Sleep, and a version of it is available in the River Heron Review. And yeah, I don't know, something fun about poetry is it's never done. So sometimes I find even after I've had a poem published, I'm still working on it, which is kind of fun because poetry is never static. It's really a living art form. So this is called How the Women in My Family Sleep. The women in my family sleep in rafters, in wind, the light beneath the tangled burlap blinds, the tangled ties. The women in my family sleep furious. When the women in my family swim, our bodies exist only as function. Water absolves our guilt. We blame red eyes on tight goggles. We weigh ourselves on the industrial scale. When the women in my family sleep, we dream of chlorine, of breaststroke and chrysalis and ear infections, the old leaves and wedding rings at the bottom of the pool. When our daughters sleep, they sleep short. They sleep like spring, like drifting pink blossoms, like ferocious crocuses, like daffodils in frivolous clown skirts. They close at dusk to open again. They close at dusk to anger again in the morning. This is a work in process, even more than all of my other works in process. And this is called Honey Triptych. Spells. I learned spells for pollen, for bees, for the children I do not have yet. I learned magic that turns my fingertips yellow, how to use a drill, practical magic, how to call raccoon mystics to my front yard, impractical magic, how to pin poems to a prayer box, necessary magic. I prepare my hands for protecting you. Breasts. I learn in cream and nectar. Wash my breasts in milk and honey, eat oranges for fiber and sunshine. I sleep naked in my bed, fry eggs on my nipples in the morning, let my stomach go strong and supple. I prepare my body for holding you. Peonies. I grow a garden for you. First peonies, then mushrooms, pleasure and sustenance. I plant bees in the soil, let them sprout, each bud a wing. I kiss the faces of roses each morning, taste their waking on my lips. I prepare my mouth for kissing you. Something you've probably already heard is I also talk a lot about bees. Obviously, bees are really incredible creatures, but my family also owns a honey company in California, and I've had the pleasure of doing some beekeeping and being involved in that business. So I think that their honey and bees are often also at the forefront of my thoughts. And poets, we have images that we return to over and over again. So planting bees, pulling bees from my skin, eating honey, those all play often in my work. This is the next one is it's a little weird. And sometimes poems just kind of come in like this kinetic rush, and you're just kind of like, okay, that was weird, but I'm going with it. So this is called All Baby Girls. All baby girls are born with satin ribbons around their neck. High quality silken strings. All baby girls are given toads they must never kiss. All baby girls wear shoes too big, all toads wear leashes. All baby girls toddle, teeter, tug at the ribbons at their necks. All toads catch them up, carrying them down, cradle them up. All plans are in place for the walking of all baby girls. Seamstresses sew up sidewalks, birds mash up seeds, flower shops are alerted. All baby girls die from formula, mixed with black magic fairy dust sparkles. All grown-up girls die from loose shoes, lost toads, rotten mascara, red meat. Every girl can be candied, candled, handled, pickled, preserved. Every girl can be cleansed with Falls Creek fairy water, skin scrubbed red, satin ribbon steamed. All girls can be tucked into bed. This next one is called Fasting on Yom Kippur. The dog curls into the small of my back, soft lumbering, pomegranate seeds pushed into my wrists. The sour of sunshine after predicted rain, goose feathers stuffed into blankets, their throats left raw. All day I have held my mind in my palms, the moths I do not have compost for. My stomach drives her wings back into the lagoon. Autumn squash breaks as Torah. Oh, sins left simmering, skin fossilizes as leaves stutter. And I am going to end us with a piece called Ballinas Elegy, which was actually just published a week ago from today in Ample Remains. So if you want to read it, you're welcome to. And I just want to thank you all for being with me today. I know this is a shorter reading, but I really wanted to share the things that felt present to me and that I kept returning to. So I hope that some of it has spoken to you. So this is called Ballinas Elegy. In the early morning of this is a quote, starting with a quote. In the early morning of January 18th, 1971, two Standard oil tankers collided in dense fog outside the Golden Gate and spilled more than 800,000 gallons of oil. Thousands of volunteers flocked to the beaches, such as Ballinas Lagoon, to save as much of the wildlife as possible. And that's from the Marin Independent Journal. My stomach has always been the lagoon. My chest, Kent Island, my skin, sand, my hair, bull kelp tangled by sea. When the birds began to wash up on my shore, their bodies slick with oil, that is when my people came. They came with long hair, with drums, with towels to hold dying birds, bays of hail to fill my estuary. And after the birds, after the oil, they stayed with me, walking barefoot, putting up tents along my beach, the edges of their tarps licked with salt. And when they grew tired of the taste of salt, they built a bookstore run by Honor System, a free box where you can expect a miracle. They opened a grocery co-op, painted the seawall in pastel, put goat in my pastures. They grew rows of calla lilies between my eucalyptus groves. And when their hair turned gray, when their hands grew too brittle to play the drums, the rising sun met with silence. When they began to talk of the oil spill and the birds as legacy, I beckoned the blue herons to bid them goodbye, to keep memory in their wings. I let them slip away silently into my tide. Still, I leave their life offerings in the shape of sand dollars and sea glass. I do not bury my own, but I let those that love me wash out to sea. All right, thank you all.
Hi, my name is Joe Elia, and I want to thank you for listening to my short story tonight. The story I'm about to read to you is one of the pieces that I originally submitted for the MFA application here at Bowling Green. And it's a piece that I'm still working on, and so I still consider it a work in progress. It's called Two Umbrellas. He looks under the bench for the umbrellas, pushing aside their new hiking boots, their old hiking boots, their ski boots, rain boots, work boots, then a stack of flip-flops, then running shoes, then walking shoes. He brushes them all aside to see what's behind and under them. The umbrellas are not there. She hides things. Well, hides isn't a fair word. That would imply intent. What she does is she picks things up and carries them with her until their fascination is gone. Then she plops them right where she is, or besides whatever catches her fancy next. That's the right word, plops. If she plops the keys or his wallet, this makes them late. And he hates to be late, especially on appointment days, and now there are a lot of those. She never minds being late. She has been late for everything for 40, almost 50 years. She couldn't help herself back then, even though she intended, promised, swore up and down to be on time. She was, and still is, drawn to things, and in those things she gets temporarily lost, and time disappears. Back then, self-conscious of her tardiness, she would make a self-conscious entrance, not showy, but breezy, wide-eyed, kinetic, a flourish of her arms, a smile, a light in her eyes, an engaging tale of the offending chain of calamities, circumstances, or joyful coincidence, and she was forgiven. The room was hers. Now, the amyloid plaques are the cause of her tardiness, and so again she can't help herself. But they don't diminish her natural dramatic flair or her particular spark, just their frequency. Somewhere behind the plaque, she is there. That's right, she is still Regina. He tries to unwind her logic. She grabbed the umbrellas because she was thinking about the rain. He goes to the hall closet where their raincoats are kept and finds her old ski jacket bunched up in the back, but no raincoat and no umbrellas. The ski jacket was kept in the spare room closet. There, he finds the navy blue sleeveless dress she had worn to their son's wedding. This is normally stored in the cedar closet in the hallway where she keeps the good stuff. In that closet, he finds her raincoat and the two umbrellas, one blue, his, and one yellow, hers. It rained the day of their son's wedding. The umbrella and raincoat must have reminded her of that. Their son was married in Colorado, so they skied for a few days after the ceremony. The wedding dress reminded her of skiing. Good old Reg. He puts the rain gear in the mudroom and returns to her in the kitchen. She's having a difficult time raising her arms to take off her bib. This won't do, she mutters. Decades of gymnastics and dance have given her shoulders that betray her at this age, and 3 solid days of rain have conspired in this betrayal. I'll get that. Sit still. Thank you, Edgar. His name is Bill. She has been inventing names for him for months now. Diego, Elliot, Preston, Aurelio. Lately, it's Edgar. From what he can tell, she thinks Edgar is her butler. A month ago, he had told the doctor about this. She only shrugged and replied, "Soon she will be too much for you. Very soon." He unties her bib and with it wipes up the pieces of eggs and spinach that are scattered around her on the table and on the floor, the results of her steadily worsening tremors. She tries to stand but can't because the seats of the kitchen chairs sit low for her and her legs get stiff. "Help me up, would you?" He bends down and she wraps her arms around his neck and together they stand up. They are face to face. They hold each other like they are tipsy, slow dancing at a church mixer. Her arms are about his neck and his hands are resting on her hips. He looks into her eyes and is suspended in this moment with her. He remembers the day they met, their first date, the backseat of his Oldsmobile, their wedding day, the birth of their kids. She says, "Someone forgot to brush this morning." He smiles and the embrace is broken. "I found our umbrellas. We'll be able to walk today." It's still raining. The rain is ending. I think we will be fine. I just got back from a walk. No, you just finished breakfast. We haven't been out for a while. It's rained for almost 3 days. She drops her shoulders, feigning exasperation. Must you always be so disagreeable? He ignores the comment. I've never seen so much rain. When can I eat breakfast? It feels like weeks since my last meal. Are you trying to starve me to death? After our walk, I'll make you something if you want. Right now, let's get you to the bathroom first. He tries to take her arm, but she refuses. I'm not helpless, Bill. Sorry. He's happy that Bill is here with her now. Maybe it could be Bill who walks with her, not Edgar. He feels foolish hoping for this. It hasn't happened for weeks now. She shuffles to the bathroom, her legs still stiff from the kitchen chairs. A few minutes pass and she calls, "Edgar, I can't reach. These damn shoulders of mine." He cleans her and they get ready for their walk. Because he is Edgar, she asks him to leave the room while she changes. He goes to the spare room with his clothes in hand. When he is dressed, he sits and waits for her. She finally emerges into the hallway between their room and the spare room with her gray sweatpants on inside out and backwards, and she hasn't put her arms through the sleeves of her sweater. One sock is half on and flops as she walks. He meets her in the hall and helps her thread her arms into her sleeves and bends down to slide the one sock on the rest of the way. He pulls the other one up for good measure. "You're a good man, Edgar." She pats his head while he's down there. He decides to leave the sweatpants as they are. "Never mind all that. Diaper? Must you, Edgar? Is there no privacy?" That's very dramatic. "Yes, Edgar, I remembered." She shuts her eyes and turns her head indignantly, pulling the elastic of her pants down a bit to reveal the crenellated waistband in all its glaring, embarrassing thickness and whiteness. "You're still as proud as ever." "Stop this. What if the kids hear you? I don't want them to know. They are alone in the house and have been for decades. Their son and his family live in Boulder, their daughter in Scottsdale. I'm sorry, was I being too loud? You'll wake the babies, Bill. Go downstairs if you're going to scream bloody murder. Why don't you come with me? We can head out for our walk. What about the babies?" "Trudy will watch them." Trudy was Reg's sister. She passed a few years ago of congestive heart failure, but has been a frequent visitor lately. "Are you sure? She's deaf as a bat." "Yes, come on, let's go." They made a commitment years ago to walk every day, to leave behind, if even for a brief hour, the endless circumstances of working, raising children, and living together that buffeted daily life. Together, they held this commitment almost sacred, and when they both retired, it was rare that they ever missed a day. Outside, after they had bundled up, after they had argued because she wanted her pant legs over her rain boots, and he wanted them in, "You'll make me into a farmer," she fought. "The whole point of rain boots is to tuck the pant leg in," he countered. They stand bracing themselves against the cold. They open their umbrellas, which bump against each other until they find a way for them to nestle together, and they walk down the drive into the street. For 3 days, the storm front crept across the area, dumping rain that fell in intermittent sheets. The accompanying winds whipped the trees and filled the air with a doleful moan, lamenting the end of their Indian summer. The autumn leaves, which were particularly dazzling this year, had been stripped from the trees and choked the yards, the streets, and the sidewalks, or roiled in the streams of runoff. The branches, now skeletal in appearance, reached upwards to swirling gray clouds. Temperatures had dropped and drizzle swept by the storm's last few gasps of blustery gust was all that remained. Into this they walk arm in arm, their brightly colored umbrellas incongruous against the gray skies and naked trees. The world is still, no cars, no people, not even squirrels. This stillness and the drizzle and the burbling runoff pack their ears. "Where did it all go?" she mutters, looking upwards at the barren trees. He tries to take her hand, but she rebuffs. What would the neighbors think? He never cared before what they thought. But Bill was my husband. I see. Well, take my arm again. It's more proper, okay? Just so you don't fall. Leaves can be slippery. He was pleased she remembered him. He was pleased when she wove her trembling hand under his arm and into the crook of his elbow. The disease wipes out the past. This had been his epiphany about a year ago. While he was cutting the grass, she came out to him and asked who had hired him and warned him that she would not pay him. Whatever was is no longer. The thought immediately loomed over their future as he watched her walk back into the house that day. And on that instant, when the sliding screen door clacked into the frame, he missed her, and he hasn't stopped. That was the day he knew he lost her. An unshared memory can just as easily be a dream. The doctor, with all her talk about soon, never once discussed this loss other than by handing him a trifold pamphlet about the disease. Sometimes he felt as if he were the sick one. She was visiting with friends or family removed or past. The disease rendered for her a world of Trudys and babies and ski trips and Elliots and Edgars. He has been rendered invisible to her. The Bill of Bill and Regina is no longer. He learned during his 2 tours in Vietnam how to cope without an anchored reality. how to carve his feelings away and create a reality that he pasted to the surreal. He learned then how to string together moments, each one its own lifetime floating untethered to the previous and vanishing at the rise of the next. One of only two things he had ever learned in that place. They walk in silence. She is sometimes given to long silences now. It seems to get longer every day. The pressure from her hand on his arm completes this moment for him, and the next, as each passes on. She's moving less stiffly now, despite the cold. We take the same route every day, but today the storm has laid a massive oak across the road, its roots stretching black and mud-covered 10 feet into the air, and the bulk of its canopy claiming an entire front yard. She is the first to speak. How the mighty falls. Is all that necessary? What should we do? Let's double back and head up Hollow Road. But we parked over there, she's pointing at the tree. Is the car okay, you think? I'm quite sure it is. Can't we go around it? Nah, too much muck. She looks at the scene one more time and nods in agreement. Let's just take Hollow Road, switch it up a bit, she says as if the idea were hers. Good thinking. They head back in the direction they just came and turn down a narrow road barely big enough for two cars. It is paved and marred by ruts, potholes, and chunks of crumbling macadam, and now is covered with leaves and treacherous, all of its hazard hidden or slick with wet foliage. Her grip on his arm tightens. He moves a bit closer to her. Trudy and I used to play on this road, and Danny Altieri bottomed out his Camaro here too. She grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, more than 100 miles away. Renee Duplass used to live over there. This is true. They were both friends with Renee for the brief time when he lived there. He was a wonderful lover, she giggled. He turns her head and sees she is grinning, practically beaming. I had no idea. Old Bill was wrapped up in designing that V-22. I barely existed to him, and Renee, well, was young, and you better not say anything to Bill about this. Renee was sweet and attentive at a time when old Bill had abandoned me. He promised her not to tell. He doesn't know what to do with this information. It could be real. It could be fiction. He could never be sure. Renee lived here more than 20 years ago during a hard time for them. Boeing had just begun work on the V-22. He was gone from home all the time, and when he was home, he was consumed with his work. There was a great distance between them, and he recalled the fighting and many nights spent sleeping in the spare room. After a year, he withdrew from the project to be with her and the kids. It was around that time that they began their walks as an effort to save their relationship. There are thousands of ways to be unfaithful. For a while, he gave himself to his work without abandon and with little concern for her or the family. He remembers the guilt he felt calling to tell her he was working late yet again, and the shame he felt leaving her and the kids on Saturday morning. While the thought of her with someone else left a wretched pain in his gut, he decided he doesn't care about Renee Duplass. The affair could have been fiction, but his infidelity had been real. I ended it because I loved Bill. He had strung together countless moments since that day in the yard. This is his favorite one so far, the one he knows he will forever hold in his memory when the soon becomes now. The rest of the way she talks about Trudy and her mother in long sentences that have little to do with each other and increasingly make little sense. He listens attentively and chimes in with a question here or there. For the most part, though, he lets her win the room. In the distance, the sun is doing its best to push the clouds from the sky. A few chickadees begin to flit about, and a chainsaw snarls somewhere in the distance. He holds the door that leads to their mudroom and takes her umbrella. He closes hers and then his, shaking them both out before bringing them inside. She's standing in the mudroom, shiny-eyed from the cold, vibrant and raw from the exercise of the past hour. The other lesson he learned in Vietnam was the intimacy of dying. Holding the hands of many fallen friends as they passed, he saw in their eyes the constructs of their lives being stripped away, left to choke the grass and the dirt and run in rivulets through the jungle detritus. Their final expressions either abject terror or abject joy. There was no in between. He supposed as death approached, the true self comes instantly into view, a self that is removed of the walls built to shelter it against the storm of living. And as the final breaths are drawn, a person is left raw and bare, their very internal essence naked and exposed to the external world, no longer protected by pretense and affectations, the ultimate vulnerability. In this moment now, he can see her true self stripped, her internal essence bared, and it is beautiful, courageous, strong, pure. If he had never seen her before, if he had never been married to her, he would have fallen in love with her instantly in this moment. He takes her arm and, without saying anything, turns her to face him. He unzips her coat and peels it back. She moves her shoulders for him, and the coat falls around her ankles. He leans in and, one at a time, slides each arm out of her sweater sleeves, and then takes the bottom of it and rolls it up and pulls it over her head. She shivers. Cold, she whispers. He reaches behind her, clasps the small of her back, and brings her to him. She puts a hand between his shoulders, and her head nestles at his neck. He can smell her, raw, fresh from nature, the smell that he slept with camping, the smell when they made love after a run or skiing or hike. He bends and pulls down her pants, which were soaked up to her knees. She had won the argument. Down around her ankles. He checks her diaper front and back. This time she doesn't turn her head and looks him in the eyes. He reaches behind her for her flannel housecoat, which he hung on the hook earlier. He guides her arms into the sleeves and closes it around her, wrapping the tie around her waist twice, because she is still thin, still fit. The second wrap of the belt allows for another momentary embrace as she rocks forward with his gentle tug. He eases her down onto the bench, takes her hat off and smooths her hair with both hands, and presses his lips to her forehead. He removes her rain boots and pants and rolls her socks off. She points her toes like a dancer to make it easier for him. With a towel he fetches from the laundry room, he dries the sweat from her feet and slides them into big fluffy socks. Helping her up from the bench, they are in the same embrace as after breakfast. This time he leans forward and kisses her on the lips. Edgar, mashing is a crime in this state. Apologies, ma'am. Now put on your slippers. He can tell by her gait the walk has worn her out. He suggests a nap and offers to start a fire for her. She agrees and lays down on the couch. Before he can turn to grab some lunch, she is asleep. He lights the fire anyways and plans to keep it burning until she's awake. As he watches the flames grow, he thinks of soon. He thinks of the intimacy they have already shared and the ultimate intimacy they will eventually share. He regards them both as transcendent gifts. One he has already unwrapped, the other he has yet to unwrap. He sits down in his chair near the hearth, and in the light and the heat of the fire that pierces the retreating gloom of the storm, he strings together several moments as the sun continues to push back the clouds. That was Two Umbrellas. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed writing it, so I'd like to see where it ends up. Thank you very much.